Thank you for joining us on this September 30th of 2025. And it is Non-Speaker Awareness Day. And I'm so pleased to be able to have Elizabeth Bonker with us today. Um, I'll let her tell you about herself, but I've been blessed to know her for a few years now. And even before we started working together on the Autism Society of Florida board, and I am Annette Lizardo, the new president of Autism Society of Florida, effective this month. And I would like Elizabeth to introduce herself and let us know, Elizabeth, please, how are you communicating with us today, and what is your preferred method of communication?
Annette, thank you for asking me to do this podcast for Non-Speakers Awareness Day. I appreciate serving on the Autism Society of Florida board with you. I am a non-speaker with autism and I type to communicate on a wireless keyboard. By the way, when I say non-speaker, I include those of us who are minimal speakers and those who repeat words and phrases. And when I say type, I include pointing to letters on a letterboard as well as pressing them on a keyboard.
Great. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. I think that helps give context to perhaps those who are not familiar with non-speakers, who may be on the autism spectrum or with dyspraxia or apraxia. Um, I wanted to ask you, what's the most important thing about you that you would like others to know?
The most important thing I would like people to know is that I founded a nonprofit called Communication for All with the mission to ensure all non-speakers have access to communication and education. C4A has three strategic initiatives. The first is C4A Academy, a program of internet-based instructional videos to teach non-speakers how to type, free of charge. C4A Academy also has case studies, written lessons, resources, and support. Our second initiative is Regulation for All. I believe most non-speakers are so dysregulated that their bodies are in fight or flight. We just completed a study with Dr. Elizabeth Torres at Rutgers University measuring the heart rate variability of 25 non-speakers over 3 months. This study will serve as the foundation for creating tools to help non-speakers get their bodies out of fight or flight to safe mode. Our third initiative is C4A Schools. We work with schools, group homes, and day programs to train their staff to create typing programs for non-speakers. Please go to our website communicationforall.org to learn more.
And I think that's important. You point out it's not just for schools that we're talking about, because non-speakers can learn at any age how to communicate, and that includes people perhaps who had not previously been um, empowered or taught to communicate in alternative methods. So my next question is, how did your journey communicating as a non-speaker begin?
I learned to type when I was 5 years old and was mainstreamed in first grade. That is what I want for all non-speakers. My teacher showed me how to point to letters first on an alphabet board and then later, on a keyboard. My parents asked one of my school ABA therapists if she wanted to be trained to be my communication partner. She stayed by my side in public school for 14 years. Our C4A Academy videos teach anyone how to be a communication partner for a non-speaker to learn to type. We start with stencils where the letters are large, so it is easier to coach our finger to touch the letters. The steps are all laid out for families and schools to help us overcome our dyspraxia, a dysfunction in planned motor movements that is well documented in autism. Dyspraxia prevents us from speaking and from moving our bodies reliably on demand. That is why non-speakers need to be taught to type with one finger with the support of a communication partner.
And I'll just add, because you haven't yet, um, but Elizabeth, our audience may or may not know, was a valedictorian at Rollins College in 2022, I believe it was. So she is very distinguished as a uh, student advocate, traveling internationally. But I kind of want to bring it back to you mentioned how you first were learning. So if you could go back when you were first starting school, what would you have liked to have been different, or what would you do differently for non-speaking students today with your wealth, looking back with your experience and knowledge now?
I had intensive ABA therapy from the age of 3. By the time I was 5 years old, my frustration would boil over into self injury because I had no way to express my thoughts and feelings. I discuss the uncomfortable topic of self injury because many educators see it as evidence of intellectual disability when the opposite is true. We are thinking and feeling human beings locked in a silent cage. After I was taught to type, my life went from hopeless to hopeful. The public school wanted to keep me in the ABA classroom, but my parents fought for my rights to have a mainstream education. I skipped kindergarten and started first grade with a wonderful teacher and my trained communication partner, Terry. Today, I am a proud graduate of Rollins College. The sad truth is that in the 22 years since I was mainstreamed in first grade, we know no other non speaking child who has been given that same opportunity. We are working with families across the country whose non speaking children are being denied access to communication and education. That discrimination goes against the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it must stop.
I agree. And how can we make systemic change for all non-speakers?
We can make systemic change with the Communication Bill of Rights. Last spring, the New York State Assembly unanimously passed the bill, and we are working on a similar bill in Florida. It simply says that people with disabilities have the right to communicate in their preferred manner. It sounds so simple, but without this bill, non speakers will continue to be denied access to communication of our choice. Please go to our website communication4all.org and join C4A Network to be part of our grassroots movement.
Right, and I will add that your commencement speech went viral, so literally it may have been eye-opening for millions of people around the world, that this was even possible. Just as inspiring and impressive, I think, is this is not your first time, but you have gone and you're back now from the Autism Europe International Congress. What do you see as the biggest challenge for non-speakers around the world?
There were 2,000 delegates at the conference from more than 60 countries. My presentation was packed with people with open minds wanting to learn. The biggest challenge is that non speakers are assumed to have an intellectual disability and not given communication and education. We have a motor disorder, not a cognitive one. People mistake our unruly bodies for a lack of understanding about what is being said to us. It is not a matter of not understanding, it is a matter of not being able to make our bodies do what we want them to do. Now that the delegates know better, we need action. We need for these organizations to partner with Communication for All to start pilot typing programs around the world.
I agree, and I will just throw in there that, this doesn't have to be high tech. Because sometimes people think, oh, I can't do a pilot program because of the cost. So we're talking low cost, I'm sorry, low tech and low cost accommodations as well. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss as we wrap up our podcast interview?
Typing saves lives. That is not hyperbole. Typing saved my friend Caden's life. Caden learned to type when he was 20 years old. He was featured in the Spellers movie at 21, and diagnosed with cancer throughout his body at 22. His doctors confirmed that typing saved his life because he told them about pain in his body that only he could know. Today, Caden is cancer-free and a Communication for All board member working for our mission. Communication saves bodies, minds, and spirits. That is why we are passionate that every non-speaker be given the opportunity to learn how to type. Please join us in creating a world where everyone has a voice. Communication for all.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up um not just Caden's experience, but the Spellers movie for our listeners if they're not aware. Elizabeth and some of her friends have started what some of us call a revolution, because it's not just her book, I Am in Here, but also Underestimated by J.B. Handley, I believe, who's also in the Spellers movie. So if you are not aware or have not seen the Spellers movie, the documentary, I highly recommend it. Um, it's going to be eye-opening, and hopefully you're going to see millions of other non-speakers in a new and different light. And that's our hope today, as we highlight Non-Speakers Awareness Day, that it not just be one day here in one nation, but that it may help, as Elizabeth is doing and advocating for around the world, for millions of other people. Um, Again, I've seen this motto and I agree. Non-speaking isn't necessarily non-thinking. Non-verbal does not mean non-thinking. In other words, um, more often than not, as Elizabeth mentioned, it is a motor issue, not a cognitive issue, in a lot of cases. So hopefully this will give our listeners a new perspective, a new interest in doing some research of their own and providing hope to those with a non-speaker in their family or their circle of influence. So I thank you again, Elizabeth, for your time and your dedication to those like my own son, Samuel, but to millions around the world. And kudos to you and your family and everyone who's worked with you over the years for their dedication and advocacy, because I know a lot's been done in just a few years, but we have a lot more work ahead of us as well. So thank you, and I appreciate you joining us today out of your busy schedule. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.